Yes, that's a really, really, really important aspect of sleep deprivation and sleep credit. So when we are sleep deprived, when we're getting 6 hours or less sleep a night, our brain and body goes into survival mode. So it's a conservation of energy to the parts of our brain and body that basically keeps us functioning, keeps us alive. So we have a withdrawal of glucose energy and blood flow from the parts of our brain that makes us human. So our prefrontal cortex. And our prefrontal cortex is responsible for decision-making skills, complex analysis, higher order thinking, even language, and our personality, and also our empathy. So what tends to happen is that one thing you notice is that people have this sort of deadpan type experience going on on their face. Their responsiveness in communication is quite slow, and our ability to interpret nonverbal communication, which is it's about 93 to 97% of our communication. So, and then of course our language is a little bit maybe slow. We maybe pick the wrong words to say, or it takes us a little while to say the things that we're trying to say because our brain is just working slower. So we have a wide open window for miscommunications, misinterpretations, and not providing the appropriate responses at the appropriate time. When we couple that situation with our poor mood regulation, because again, mood is a necessary thing to keep us alive in the short term. So our buffer system isn't working. Our regulatory system isn't working properly. So we are wide open again to spikes and drops in our mood, which means that some people might get into actual physical fights. So we have a spike in aggression, which is a primal instinct. Or, suddenly you have a rush of adrenaline because we're just on the seesaw. And we will get into arguments and fights, which is not helpful, especially in our work environment, because our workplace relationships are really, really important. And then what is really interesting is that because we see our work as the basis of our survival in this society, we make this decision to invest our resources into the work time. So even though our resources are quite low, they all get focused on work. So that any energy that we have goes into work. So by the time you get home, and your children are wanting to spend time with you, and your other half needs to decompress from the day, or you need to decompress from the day, you just don't have the energy to do that. And that's going to have a knock-on effect in many different ways. Firstly, you're going to have some fights, or you're going to withdraw. Your children are going to feel maybe emotionally neglected. Their needs aren't going to be met. Notwithstanding, we're teaching our children through our behavior. So that's also really important. So the way that you behave is telling your children how they should behave as adults. So think about your nonverbal information you're giving your kids. Because your physiology, your hormones, your mood is just, going up and down throughout the day. At first, we're going to experience decision fatigue. So we're going to make some pretty rotten decisions, perhaps when you're sleep deprived. One of those is that apparently men are more likely to have an affair when they're sleep deprived. And that's because they're experiencing something called decision fatigue. So there's poor decision making being made, not just at work, but in your personal lives. But also because there's dysregulation in your hormone physiology. So you might actually interpret some cues that might be misinterpreted. So you might actually think that somebody fancies you when they really don't, or you might actually behave in an inappropriate way, or reach out to someone. But then what happens is that the energy just sort of plummets. And when you're sleep deprived, you're just physically not up to completing the task. So it's going to have a knock-on effect with your mood, with your ability to perform sexually. So let's just take it out of the affair situation and back into the relationship situation. We have emotional intimacy needs in our relationships, and we have physical intimacy needs. And if we're not able to do that in our relationship, that's going to have an enormous impact in the reason why that you're in a relationship together. Because ultimately, you're there to navigate the vicissitudes of life together and support each other. But you just don't have the energy to do it. So in more serious, when thinking about this in a more serious way, if we're too sleep deprived, if we go on living sleep deprived, it might actually affect our survival. We're just not going to be having kids. We're not going to be procreating. And also, let's face it, there are few pleasures in life. Food and sex are probably the best. So, we're setting ourselves up to just not really enjoying life as a whole. Notwithstanding, it also affects our hormonal balances for actually producing children in the first place. So that's really important.